Climate and disaster resilience are important aspects to create resilient cities. The United Nations Development Programme, known as UNDP, is an important player in this context. The agency focuses on sustainable development but taking risk reduction into account. They have put it into practice more than 1,200 risk reduction plans in more than 50 countries. We had a talk with Nuri Bermudez, a risk manager officer for UNDP in Ecuador. We wanted to learn a bit from her experience and the work of UNDP. So let's take a look at it.
The main role of a disaster risk management officer is to provide high technical assistance to the people and the countries. The main function is to design and implement programs and projects and strategies to help the government, the communities, the private sector to mainstream disaster risk management, to design and implement policies, public policies, to achieve a more resilient society. Now, more and more human settlements show high level of vulnerability. The risk accumulates and increases. The role of this position is to contribute with the different governments to increase their capacities at technical and political level, to strengthen their governance mechanism and policies on urban planning, reduction, preparedness, response, and recovery. Disaster risk management needs to be incorporated into the different subjects. Well, United Nations Development Programme is an UN agency with presence in more than 178 countries all over the world. Many projects, programs, and initiatives are in place to contribute with cities around the world, with governments and people to cope with more resilient societies. On December 2017, UNDP produced a document called Resilient Zero Carbon, Risk Informed and Sustainable. This report shows the UNDP's work in climate change, disaster risk reduction, and energy for the period 2015-2017. This report comprised of 15 country case studies related with climate action, disaster risk reduction, recovery, and sustainable energy. As an example, in Ecuador, UNDP is helping Ecuador to build back better, stronger and more resilient, following the devastating earthquake in 2015. One of our contributions was to work in some urban centers affected by the earthquake. UNDP's efforts fosters entrepreneurship among small and micro enterprises that sustain many of the urban poor. Through the Enmarta initiative, technical assistance is provided for innovation, better business practices, new products, and highest quality and service standards. Over 530 families have recovered their businesses, and another 160 small shops owners have been able to reactivate their micro enterprises. UNDP enables countries and communities to protect and accelerate development gains and deliver progress against the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, through efforts to reduce disaster risk, tackle emissions, transition to sustainable energy, and adapt to the impact of climate change. Well, resilience is a vital element in many stages of development and crisis response. To improve resilience capacity of a city, many aspects need to be into consideration, such as economy and society, infrastructure and environment, leadership and governance, and health and well-being. These four aspects can be combined in different types of projects as a preventive measures to ensure sustainable recovery and protect development gains. UNDP defined resilience as a transformative process of strengthening the capacity of individuals, communities, and societies at large to anticipate, prevent, recover, and transform in the face of shocks, stresses, and change. Recovery is a critical state in fostering resilience. It is the time when countries and communities can either return to the status quo, leaving intact the conditions which led to the crisis, or can seize the opportunity to strengthen society's resilience to all hazards, whilst tackling the underlying cause of vulnerability, including poverty, inequality, and fragility. From my point of view, these three elements, poverty, inequality, and fragility, are some of the most difficult aspects to improve resilience. The word resilience is becoming a term of mandatory use. Nowadays, without this word, no speech or publication is considered relevant. But as other words that are gaining notoriety, the abuse of them can be losing real meaning, or it can be converted into a monopoly of specialists and technocrats. We need to work in a holistic approach, understanding deeply the real concept of resilience and sustainability, understanding the territory, the interrelation between the communities, the people, the institutions, the elements, the constructed elements, the infrastructures, and the ecosystems that converge at the same time in the same physical space. Understanding the cause-effect relations of the different systems, the system complexities show that something in one point can be an effect, and in a different moment can be a cause. Let me explain with an example. The fact of chopping a tree causes deterioration of the capacity of a forest to provide environmental services, such as the capacity to store and release water gradually. This means that in a heavy rain season, it can cause landslides and floods in corresponding basins, as a consequence of which a disaster could happen and generates economic losses and human lives, and over a long period, soil impoverishment and displacement on affected farmers toward the cities. One cause generates different effects. You are the new generation to continue writing the story of this planet. We need to resist and to be resilient. Then we need to act quickly, in an innovative way of thinking, focusing on the poorest people, leaving no one behind. Try to understand deeply the main concepts of resilience and resistance of any kind of problem. Interact between different academic backgrounds and deeply understand the complexity of the system. What are the cause-effect relations? What could be the successive effects that this cause could create? We need to find adequate adaptive solutions. The need for action is urgent. Risk, vulnerability, and the lack of capacity, and we need to protect the countries and communities from climate change and disaster. These are central issues, indivisible from sustainable development. You have an obligation and an opportunity to reconfigure development strategies so that they meet the needs of the present generation without compromising future generation abilities to meet their needs.